I was born in Detroit. Lived in Detroit for the first 5 years of my life. When I was 5 or 6 years old, my parents moved out to Redford Township. I read a lot when I was a kid. When I was in kindergarten, I could read. And in fact, I remember the principal of our elementary school yanking me out of the kindergarten class and taking me to the first and the second grade classes and saying, "This kid can read, and he's only a kindergartner, and if he can read, then you can learn to read too." I think that translated into writing. I used to do kind of family newspapers, and when I got to high school, I started writing for the school paper and eventually became the editor, and I just have always enjoyed it. When I was a high school student, I was getting dressed for high school one morning and I switched on the radio like I usually did, but I got a different station, from Canada called CKLW. And there was this gravelly voice that came across the airwaves talking about social issues and labor and economic equality. I was really fascinated by what they had to say about civil rights and social problems, and I started listening every day. I grew up in Redford Township, which is the first suburb west of Detroit, was all white. And we organized a group called the Redford Citizens for Better Human Relations. Very, moderate sounding name. And we decided, there should be open housing here, and we should invite people from every ethnicity and race to live in this wonderful community. And so we held an open housing march down 5 Mile Road, the main drag in the city, and we ended up on the steps of the Township Hall, and we invited the NAACP from Detroit to come and join us. So we had an integrated march for open housing, and the reaction from the right-wingers and the conservatives in the township was really vicious. They plastered our photographs over one of the local newspapers and, harassed us, but we persevered. And today, many years later, Redford is probably about 35 to 40% African American. I was hired as editor of the American Teacher, and we moved to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Washington, D.C. I had a job offer to come back to Detroit to work as editor of Solidarity magazine for the United Auto Workers, and was editor of Solidarity for 22 years. Writing carried me into a lot of these other areas of political and social interest, and I was able to use my writing skills to advance those political programs. I feel very strongly about dealing with those, and so those feelings took me to the March on Washington with Dr. King in 1963, to anti-war demonstrations in Detroit and in Washington, and I felt that my responsibility as a human being is to look out for people who are struggling for their rights, and to do what I can to support them. And that was through both demonstrations and organizing and writing for publications that have social impact. I'm hoping that we can create a society in which we respect each other. It's easy to get discouraged. I mean, when you have wars and bombing and people being put in jail for their political views, or being fired because they have unpopular views, or being stopped at the border because they are trying to flee oppression in their home countries and by coming to this country. Yeah, you can get discouraged. You can easily get discouraged, but I just think that it's so important to keep in mind the goal that we have of creating a better society. And one of the things I do is from time to time I pick up a book that was written by a historian named Howard Zinn called People's History of the United States. And in that book, the author looks at small victories that have taken place over the years, a strike, or even and big victories, winning the right to vote for women, winning the Civil Rights Act, and those kinds of things keep going over and over and over, happening over and over and over again in American history. And you look at those struggles and you see that, with a lot of work and a lot of efforts, we can win. I think the best way to pick yourself up is to get active. If you find yourself in a situation where things look very gloomy and we're not winning, you just have to pick yourself up and get together with other people who share your views and organize.